For the last several years, a steady march of rising food costs has been battering the budgets of American families, a painful side effect of the economic dislocations brought on by the pandemic. Each weekly trip to the grocery store has been met with sticker shock as the price tags climbed higher and higher on staple items from milk and eggs to bread and meat. But finally, there are glimpses of reprieve on the horizon. According to data tracked by Adobe Incorporated, online grocery prices fell a significant 3.7% in August compared to the previous month. This represented the largest single-month decline the firm has recorded since it began monitoring online grocery pricing back in 2014. While online grocery shopping still accounts for just around 12% of total grocery sales nationally, it serves as a leading indicator of where overall food prices may be heading. The wild swings we've seen in online pricing over the last few years have tended to be echoed, if more mildly, by the brick-and-mortar food sellers in subsequent months. For American families stretched to the breaking point by the cumulative effects of rampant inflation, any relief on the grocery front would be an incredibly welcome development. In the hierarchy of household budgeting challenges wrought by rising prices, food costs rank among the most intractable and worrisome. Yes, the costs for big-ticket items like homes, cars, and major appliances have surged dramatically as well over the last few years. But those large purchases can sometimes be deferred until calmer economic conditions return. Groceries, by contrast, represent an inflexible weekly requirement that cannot simply be postponed or eliminated from the family ledger. And for those millions of households barely scraping by and existing paycheck to paycheck, groceries make up a substantial portion of available income each month. When the costs for these essentials spike as they have in recent years, it quickly translates into ruthless belt-tightening and difficult trade-offs regarding which other bills get paid. The pain of the grocery inflation squeeze has not been evenly distributed across society either. While middle and upper-middle-class families may have grimaced at the rising checkout totals, they could at least leverage credit and savings to partially absorb the shock. But for lower-income families already struggling to keep their heads above water, the escalating grocery bills have felt like a brutal second job weighing them down. Small wonder then that the issue of food costs has taken on such political potency as we enter the home stretch of another presidential election cycle. On the Republican side, candidate Donald Trump has been relentlessly hammering the Biden administration over the more than 20% cumulative increase in grocery prices that has occurred during the president's term so far. His campaign speeches paint vivid scenes of hardworking parents pinching pennies at the checkout line thanks to the failures of Democratic economic policies. Not to be outdone, Vice President Kamala Harris and the Democrats have made stopping price gouging by greedy grocery chains a central plank of their anti-inflation agenda should they retain control of the White House. With images of fat cat corporate profits and calloused indifference to consumer struggles, their rhetoric aims squarely at the economic angst coursing through so many households. Of course, we've been down this road of political demagoguery and scapegoating before when it comes to the perpetual challenge of managing inflation in a vast, complex economy. The economic forces that cause prices to rise and fall are multifaceted and slippery, rarely yielding to the simple nostrums promised on the campaign trail. Still, the fact that this debate is even occurring at all underscores the toll that food inflation has taken on the national psyche over the last few years. For an issue that accounts for less than 9% of the overall consumer price index measurement, it has achieved remarkable psychological heft and resonance, which is what makes the recent reversal in online grocery pricing so fascinating to ponder. If the early indicator of lower online food costs does indeed presage a broader downward correction in brick-and-mortar grocery pricing over the coming months, it could provide much-needed respiratory room for millions of beleaguered family budgets. The early signs of moderation are already evident in consumer expectations. According to a Federal Reserve Bank of New York survey released this week, the median consumer expectation for food price increases over the next year has fallen back to around 4.4% as of August. That's roughly in line with the levels we saw in the years preceding the pandemic turbulence. This recalibration of expectations may be one of the most important dynamics to watch as we assess whether the inflation dragon truly is being subdued. For years, the Federal Reserve and other economic policymakers have emphasized the criticality of anchoring long-term inflation expectations. When consumers and businesses begin to assume that costs will just keep rising at accelerated levels indefinitely, it can become a self-fulfilling vicious cycle as pricing moves higher in anticipation. The nightmare scenario for economic managers has been a potential rerun of the harrowing 1970s experience. Back then, Persistently high inflation rates became deeply entrenched in the public psyche, leading to soaring wage and price demands that fed upon themselves. It took a brutal recession induced by the Federal Reserve under Paul Volcker to finally break that wage-price spiral and wring inflationary psychology out of the system. So if Americans are now adjusting their mentality to assume more historically normal levels of annualized food price increases, it would mark a key psychological pivot. Rational expectations of moderate inflation become rational realities of moderate inflation. And that could unleash powerful compounding effects across the entire economy as other pricing behaviors adjust in sync. This is not to prematurely declare victory or become Pollyannish about the inflation battle. The latest readings on Core Consumer Price Index, the measure that strips out volatile food and energy prices, still showed an annualized increase of around 6% as of July. That's far too hot for the Federal Reserve's comfort level. And other leading indicators like labor costs and commercial rents continue to exert upward pressure on inflation. No one should expect the Fed to ease up on its relentless campaign of interest rate hikes and quantitative tightening until those core price pressures dissipate meaningfully. But the confluence of moderating food price signals and realigning consumer expectations does at least offer a flicker of hope that we may finally be turning a corner on this insidious inflation cycle. And for financially stretched American families longing for some meaningful respite, even the prospect of more manageable grocery bills on the horizon would be a welcome tiding of comfort. Those weekly voyages up and down the supermarket aisles are about far more than just ensuring there's food on the table. They are profound psychological experiences that go to the very heart of how we perceive our economic security and well-being. When that simple ritual of survival becomes tinged with a sense of persistent struggle and feeling of being fleeced, it shapes mentalities and anxieties about the future in ways that quickly transcend the mundane costs of mere provisions. The potential reversal we're glimpsing on grocery pricing is about much more than crumbs of savings here or there. It's about reclaiming a semblance of confidence and control over the family budget after an interminable period of feeling battered and defenseless from all sides. It's about reasserting the simple dignity of being able to provide for one's household without perpetual anxiety. Yes, it's just groceries we're talking about, but those aisles of sustenance have always been hallowed ground for the American dream. If relief is finally materializing there after such a long inflationary ordeal, it could mark the pivotal psychological turning point when the nation's optimism about economic possibilities is revived as well.